Tonight, we are visiting a small English market town. The year is somewhere around 1450, though the people living here do not think about it in those terms. For them, it is simply the world as it has always been and will always be. A town of timber framed buildings and narrow lanes, a town of church bells and market days and the smell of wood smoke drifting through the evening air. The market closed hours ago. The stalls have been packed away. The merchants have carried their unsold goods back into storerooms and locked their heavy wooden doors. Shopkeepers are pulling their shutters across windows and dropping iron bars into their brackets. The sound of it carries through the quiet streets, a rhythmic closing down, one door at a time until the whole town has fastened itself shut for the night. Smoke rises from chimneys all along the main street. Inside those houses, families are gathering around their fires. Children are being sent to bed. The last of the daylight is fading from the western sky, leaving behind a deep blue that darkens slowly toward black. In a small house near the edge of town, a man named Roger is finishing his evening meal. He is in his early 40s, not tall, not short. His face has the weathered look of someone who spends most of his nights outdoors. His hands are thick and capable. He moves without hurry, the way a person moves when they have done the same things at the same times so many evenings that the body simply knows what comes next. He finishes eating. He sets his bowl aside. He pushes back from the table. He puts on his coat. It is a heavy wool coat, dark in color, worn soft at the elbows. He has owned it for many years. He buttons it slowly from the bottom up, the way he always does. He reaches for his staff, which leans in the same corner of the room where it always leans. A length of good solid oak, smooth from years of handling, slightly taller than he is. Then he lifts his lantern. The lantern is a simple iron-framed thing with panels of thinly scraped horn that let the candlelight glow through without letting the wind blow it out. He checks the candle inside. Enough for several hours. He will carry another in his pouch for when it burns low. He opens his door. The evening air comes in cool and smelling faintly of rain and chimney smoke. The last edge of twilight sits on the rooftops. In a few minutes, it will be gone entirely. Roger steps out into the street. He pulls the door close behind him. He hears it settle into its frame. He turns and begins walking. This is how another night begins. The town is not yet fully asleep. As Roger makes his first rounds, moving through the main street and then turning down the side lanes and then back again, the town is still settling in for the night. There are still lights in windows, still voices muffled behind thick walls, still the occasional sound of footsteps from somewhere ahead or behind. He passes the inn at the corner of the market square. Inside, there are travelers who arrived this afternoon and are still sitting with their ale, talking quietly at their tables. The innkeeper will be with them for another hour yet. Firelight glows orange through the narrow gaps in the shutters and falls in thin lines across the cobblestones outside. Roger walks past without slowing. He will pass this way again before midnight and again after. By then the shutters will be dark. He passes the bakehouse where the baker is already awake again after only a few hours of rest. The baking begins in the deep night so that the bread will be ready before the market opens. Roger can smell the first fire being laid in the big clay oven, wood smoke and a faint warmth from the low chimney. Every night he passes this building several times, and most nights he can track the progress of the baking by the smell alone. First the fire, then the warming stone, then hours later, the bread itself. He passes a mercer's shop where a lamp is still burning behind the shutters. The merchant inside is finishing his accounts, running his finger down a long column of figures by the light of a single candle. Roger does not know this for certain. He simply knows that the lamp is usually there at this hour, and usually gone by the time the church bell rings for 9. A family is still awake in one of the houses near the church. Roger can hear the low voice of a father telling something to his children, and then quiet laughter. Then the voice again, slower, winding down. This is what Roger does. He walks, he observes, he listens. His job, reduced to its plainest form, is to notice things. To notice whether anything is wrong, whether any fire has gotten out of hand, whether any gate has been left unsecured, whether any stranger is moving through the streets in a way that does not seem quite right. He checks the town gates, which are closed and barred at night. He tries the latches on the storehouses near the market. He walks the length of the main street, and then all the side streets, one after another, methodically, the same route he has walked hundreds of times before. Most nights, nothing is wrong. Most nights, the gates are secure, the storehouses are locked, the fires are all safely behind their hearths. Most nights, Roger walks the entire town and finds nothing to report in the morning, except that another night has passed without incident. He does not find this disappointing. He moves the circle of lantern lights slowly along the lane ahead of him, stepping over the uneven cobblestones he knows by memory, and listens to the town grow quieter. Gradually, the town goes dark. Window by window, the lights disappear. The lamp behind the mercer's shutters goes out. The family near the church falls silent. The inn at the corner stays lit a little longer than the rest. But eventually it too goes dark, and the square is left to the night. Voices disappear. Doors close. Even the dogs settle into silence. What is left is the town at night, and it is a different place entirely from the town in daylight. In the daylight, this market town is full of movement and noise. Carts grinding over cobblestones, merchants calling out, children running, animals, colors, smells, the constant negotiation of a town that runs on trade and talk. In the daylight, it belongs to everyone who lives in it. In the darkness, it belongs to Roger. Not in any possessive way. He does not think of it like that. But he knows this town in the dark the way no one else does. And the town in the dark is different enough from the town in the light that it almost seems like a different place. The same buildings, the same streets, the same cobblestones. But the scale of everything shifts at night. The lanes seem narrower. The sky above the rooftop seems closer. Every sound carries differently, reflecting off walls and corners in ways that daylight somehow smooths away. Roger walks, and the circle of lantern light moves ahead of him. This is the image he carries in his mind on nights when he cannot sleep in the daytime. The small pool of warm yellow light moving through the black lanes, the shadows it throws backward from every stone and door frame, the way it catches the underside of the eaves overhead, the world that exists within the light, and the world that exists just beyond it, and the knowledge that both worlds are familiar. The moon is up tonight, not quite full, but bright enough to add a cold blue light to the rooftops and the higher sections of the walls. Where the moonlight touches, the cobblestones are pale and quiet. Where it does not reach, the lanes are so dark that Roger trusts his feet more than his eyes. His feet know this ground. They have known it for years. He passes the church. The great stone wall of it rises up, blacker than the sky, cutting off the stars. The churchyard gate is closed. He rests his hand on the iron latch for a moment, feeling the cold of the metal, then moves on. He passes the old mill house at the north end of town. The water wheel is still at night, no sound coming from it, and the silence in that spot always feels slightly louder than the silence elsewhere, as though the air around the wheel is still expecting movement. He turns back toward the market square, and the circle of lantern light follows him around the corner. A cat appears from somewhere, pauses in the edge of the light, watches him with calm eyes, and then slips back into the darkness. Roger barely looks down at it. There are always cats. He walks on. The town breathes quietly around him. The stars are steady overhead. Somewhere far away, across the dark fields beyond the town wall, an owl is calling. Midnight is somewhere in the middle of the night, though Roger does not always know exactly when it comes. He listens for the church bell, which rings the hours, and finds it a useful if imprecise guide. Sometimes the bell seems to arrive sooner than expected. Sometimes a whole long stretch of walking passes without it, and the silence between strikes feels enormous. He walks through the narrow lanes behind the butcher's row, through the alley beside the dyer's yard, across the market square where the empty stalls are just shapes in the darkness, a geometry of posts and cross beams and folded canvas, through the little passage that runs beside the church and opens onto the quietest part of the town, where there are only a handful of houses, and then the road that leads to the east gate. He checks the east gate. The heavy timber doors are closed and barred as they should be. The iron hardware is cold and solid under his hand. He stands there for a moment, listening. Beyond the gate, the road continues into the darkness toward the next town, several hours away on foot. Sometimes very late, a traveler arrives and must knock and announce themselves to be let in. Roger does not admit anyone on his own authority. That is a matter for the gatekeeper and the bailiff. He simply watches and reports. But tonight, no one is coming. He stands at the gate and listens to the fields, wind moving through whatever is growing in the strips beyond the walls. A distant sound that might be a dog barking at a farm. Very far off, barely there. then nothing again. He pauses often simply to listen. This is part of the work that most people do not understand when they imagine what a night watchman does. They imagine perhaps more walking, more purposeful movement, more doing. But a great deal of what Roger does is standing still, stopping in the middle of a lane and simply listening, standing at the corner of a building with one hand resting on the stone and simply watching the darkness ahead. The value of this is not always obvious, but there are things that listening will catch, that walking will not. The low crackle that means a fire has started somewhere unexpected. The movement of a large animal, a horse, or an ox that has gotten loose from its stable and is making its slow, confused way through the dark streets. The sound of a shutter swinging in the wind, which might mean it has been left open and the room inside is exposed to the cold or the rain. Most nights he hears none of these things. Most nights he simply stands in the dark and listens to the town sleeping and then moves on. He crosses the market square again and walks south toward the mill pond. The water is very still tonight, black and flat, and it holds a fragmented version of the moon. He stands at the edge of it for a moment. The reeds at the near bank are motionless. An occasional small sound as the water moves very slightly against the bank. He turns and walks back toward the church. The church bell rings. He counts. 3, or perhaps 4. The sound carries through the cold air and then disappears, and the silence after it feels slightly deeper than the silence before. Most nights pass this way, and that is exactly how Roger likes it. One winter night, there is snow. It began in the afternoon, and by evening the whole town is changed. The cobblestones are covered. The rooftops are white. The usual sounds of the night are muffled, absorbed by the layer of soft snow, and Roger's footsteps make only a small compressed sound as he walks, quieter than usual, as though the world has wrapped itself in cloth. The circle of lantern light looks different in the snow. The light scatters upward off the white ground, brightening the walls on either side, and the shadows fall differently, and Roger finds himself noticing familiar corners and doorways as though seeing them slightly afresh. He knows this lane. He knows exactly which door frame that is, and yet the snow has made it new. He walks through the market square. His are the only tracks in it. In the morning, there will be dozens of sets of footprints overlapping each other in all directions, and all the carts and animals in the constant busy traffic of the market day, and none of it will preserve what is here now, which is a single pair of footprints moving in a careful arc across an otherwise perfect white square. He does not particularly think about this. He simply walks through it. The winter passes, spring comes, then summer. On warm summer nights, the town smells different. There is something green and alive coming from the gardens behind the houses, and sometimes a window that would be closed in winter is left open, and Roger can hear the breathing of whoever sleeps inside, or a child turning in their sleep, or a snatch of murmured dream talking that stops as suddenly as it began. On rainy autumn evenings, the water comes off the rooftops in thin curtains and runs in small rivers down the gutters on either side of the lane. Roger walks with his head slightly down, his collar up, the rain pattering on the shoulders of his coat. The lantern hisses very faintly when drops of rain find the horn panels. His footsteps make a wetter sound on the cobblestones. He passes the bakehouse, and the smell of wood smoke is sharper in the damp air, and the warmth from the low chimney is more noticeable. The seasons come and go without requiring anything from him except that he continues walking. The town changes. There was a child Roger used to see playing near the market, a boy of perhaps 7 or 8, who would kick a leather ball against the wall of the chandler's shop and then retrieve it and kick it again. Roger passed him many times in the early evening before the town grew dark. He never spoke to the child, or not more than a nod, but he noticed him the way he noticed everything. Years later, the young man who helps the chandler load and unload his goods has the same face and the same way of moving. He is perhaps 18 now, nearly as tall as the chandler himself, and the leather ball is long gone. Roger passes him sometimes in the late afternoon, just before his shift begins, and does not say anything. But he notices a family he knew well moved away one spring. New people moved into their house by midsummer. By the following winter, Roger already knew the shape of their household by their nighttime sounds, when their lamps burned late, which nights they were up early. The new family became part of his knowledge of the town the same way the old family had been. An old widow who used to leave a candle burning in her window every night without exception, for reasons no one ever explained to Roger. The candle simply appeared after dark and burned until perhaps 1 or 2 in the morning, and then went out. It was always there. And then one winter, it was not. The window was dark for 3 nights before anyone in the town noticed she was gone. Roger had noticed on the first night, but it was not his place to say anything before morning, and by morning the day watchman had already been informed. Children become apprentices. Apprentices become shopkeepers. Young men who walk these streets in the evenings become fathers who put their own children to bed before darkness falls. The town is always slightly becoming something it was not before, and Roger walks through all of it, night after night, carrying his circle of lantern light through the familiar lanes. The same church bell, the same cobblestones, the same cold corner by the north gate where the wind comes through even in summer, the same smell of the tannery when the wind is from the east, the same creak of the sign above the inn, a sound so familiar that Roger no longer hears it consciously, only notices it when it stops. He does not think of himself as witnessing anything. He is simply present, night after night, as he has always been. The hours before dawn are the quietest. Roger has been walking for many hours now. His legs know it. There is a pleasant heaviness in his feet, not pain exactly, more the solid feeling of a long task almost complete. The lantern is burning on the second candle. He replaced the first somewhere around midnight, doing it in the familiar automatic way, shielding the new flame with his body against the wind while he transferred the light. The streets are as empty as they will ever be. He walks through the market square, and there is nothing moving anywhere in his circle of light. He walks down the lane that runs behind the church, and the sound of his own footsteps is the only sound. He stops and listens, and there is almost nothing. The faintest movement of air through the gap between two buildings. Something very distant, an animal, a cow perhaps in one of the farms outside the walls. Otherwise, silence. He has stood in this particular quiet many hundreds of times. There is something in it that is not quite like any other kind of quiet. It is not the quiet of absence, not the silence of a place where nothing ever happens. It is the quiet of a full place, resting. The town is still here, still present, simply asleep. If he listens carefully enough, he can feel the weight of it. All the people and animals and goods and history, breathing very softly in the dark. He does not put any of this into words, even to himself. It is simply what night feels like, this deep into it. He walks on, and then, almost without his noticing it, things begin to change. The baker's chimney shows a thread of smoke, thinner and more purposeful than the dying wisps from the house chimneys. The oven is being fired for the first loaves. A light appears in the small window beside the bakehouse door. A warm orange glow that Roger spots from halfway down the lane. He has seen this same light begin at the same hour more times than he could count. It is one of the most reliable things in the town. The eastern sky is still black, but with something behind it now, a quality of not quite darkness that is not yet anything you could call light, but is different from an hour ago. Roger notices this partly by sight and partly by some other sense that has developed over the years, an awareness of where the night is in its arc. A rooster calls from one of the yards near the south gate. Then another, further away. He walks his final round more slowly now. Frost has settled on some of the wooden doors overnight, a thin white film on the grain of the timber that will melt within an hour of sunrise. He notices it on a door here and there as he passes. Another chimney adds its smoke to the sky. A light appears in a window above a carpenter's workshop. The carpenter rises early. The eastern sky is the color of deep water now, dark blue, shading towards something pale at the very edge of the rooftops. Roger has watched this particular shade of sky many hundreds of times, and he finds, as always, that it looks very much the same from one year to the next. The quality of the light does not change with the years. Only the person watching it does. He crosses the market square for the last time. The circle of lantern light moves ahead of him, slightly dimmer now as the first pale suggestion of morning begins to soften the absolute darkness. Soon it will seem fainter still. Soon the town will not need it. His work is almost finished. The town is beginning to wake. The baker's boy passes Roger in the lane with a basket of warm loaves, nodding without speaking. He is used to seeing Roger at this hour. He has been seeing Roger at this hour his whole working life and thinks nothing of it. Roger is simply part of the early morning, like the smell of fresh bread and the sound of the first carts. More lights and windows now, more smoke, the sound of someone drawing water from the well in the yard behind the inn, the scrape of a shutter being pushed open, the particular sound of someone shaking out a blanket from an upper window, a dry rippling sound that carries down into the lane below. Roger turns toward home. He walks the last few streets without hurrying, the way he always does. There is no need to hurry. The night is over when it is over, and this ending is as familiar as everything that preceded it. He has walked this final route home thousands of times, and his body knows the exact sequence of turns, the exact number of paces between corners, the slight uphill slope of the last lane that leads to his door. He reaches his house. He opens the door. He hangs up his lantern in its place by the door. The candle inside has burned down almost completely. Just a small warm stub of light. He watches it for a moment and then it goes out on its own, as it usually does, right when it is no longer needed. He leans his staff in its corner. It settles there with a small familiar sound. He sits on the low bench inside the door and removes his boots. One, then the other. He sets them side by side on the flagstone floor. He takes off his coat. He hangs it on its peg. He touches the worn collar briefly as he always does, though he could not say why. He sits for a moment at his table. Through the small window he can see the lane outside, where the morning light is arriving in earnest now, pale and even, filling the spaces that his lantern occupied only a few minutes ago. Someone passes the window pushing a cart, the wheels loud on the cobblestones. Children's voices somewhere not far off, early risers running toward whatever it is that children run toward in the morning. The town is coming back to itself. The daytime version of it, the one that belongs to everyone, is reassembling itself street by street, sound by sound. Roger stretches. He is tired in a comfortable way, the tiredness of a long, familiar task completed. He lies down. Outside, the market town is filling up. Shopkeepers are opening their shutters. The first traders are setting up their stalls. The smell of the bakehouse bread drifts through the morning air. Somewhere across town, the church bell is ringing. And this time, it is a bell for the living day, rather than for the counted hours of the dark. Roger closes his eyes. While the town fills with voices and carts and the ordinary noise of people going about their daylight lives, he sleeps. He belongs to the other version of this town, the quieter version, the slower version, the one that most people never see because they are inside it when it exists, asleep behind their closed shutters and locked doors, simply trusting that the night is being watched. He has been watching it for years. When the light fades to night, and the market closes, and the shopkeepers lock their doors again, he will rise and eat and put on his coat. He will reach for his staff. He will lift his lantern. He will step out into the evening streets, and the circle of lantern light will move ahead of him through the gathering dark, and the quiet rhythm of the night will continue, as it has always done, as it will always do.